Adi, good morning, and thank you again for taking the time, right, to spend with us, walking through the HappyFresh experience with Profit.co.
Yeah.
So first, to begin with, Adi, it'll be great, if you can give a background of HappyFresh as a company, right? What does the company do? When it was started, the historical background, and how you are doing, what are your focus areas now, geographically where you are operating, right, all of that.
Okay, sure. Thanks a lot, Sanjil. So I think a little bit background and shared about what is actually HappyFresh. So we actually e-groceries company that is operating in 3 countries in Southeast Asia, which is Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. Basically, we start at 2015. Focusing on Malaysia and Indonesia as a marketplace groceries player that we actually work together with a lot of supermarkets, specialty stores to actually deliver the groceries needs without having to go out through our apps like that. And throughout the journey, we actually start building our own environment to have like a HappyFresh supermarket so that we can actually capture a more wider customer with a lot more, a lot more SKU, and also depending on what the customer needs like that, seeing that there's a lot of problem in terms of out of stock and fulfillment, something like that. In terms about my role in HappyFresh, I was actually from the HR team as a people partner and also the people performance. Basically, as a people performance, I'll be the one who's actually managing and also focusing in terms about how we actually manage and capturing all of the performance of our employee before we actually then work with all of the stakeholders and inside the HR team, also with all of the people leaders to actually define what will be the appropriate process throughout the people journey in HappyFresh based on their performance, what are the learning, what are the challenges, what are the advancements that we can make actually for them.
Okay, great. And HappyFresh is a funded startup, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay, great. So how many rounds of funding has HappyFresh got so far?
Yeah, last year I think we actually already captured another funding with that. We're still working also to ensure that the funding is actually still going on with our current process like that. I think around CRT. I'm a little bit forgot about that, but let me check it later.
Okay, that's just a curiosity. So in addition to it, in terms of how HappyFresh is overall doing the strategy execution, right? So I understand that you're also using OKRs as an execution philosophy, right? So we're going to primarily talk about performance management today, but can you, just one question on how you are doing with respect to OKRs, can you please answer?
Okay, sure. So I think in terms about how we actually capturing the business process, it's something that's relatively new in HappyFresh that we start to formalize everything. Back then, all of the management, we have like a working sheet that inside of the management team to actually capture what are the metrics that we're measuring like that, but there's no really visibility on how we actually progressing from each of the function like that. And then throughout the year of 2021, we start to try to implement the right OKR process. And then it's still a learning process. It's still a change management that we want to push and try with our employee. But we starting to get the stepping foot with that, with the OKR. We start using the OKR tools with Profit. We start also formalizing how to actually set up the right measurement metric and also how we can actually move forward with OKR.
Okay, thanks. So now let's move on to performance management, right? And we would like to understand the existing process, right? Or the pre-Profit.co era, right? There, how was performance management done? Specifically, how was performance assessment done? Were you using any tools before Profit.co?
Yes. So in terms about the performance itself, we used to have like in-house tools that we actually develop with third-party vendors. Back then, we actually measured it based on the KPI and OKR of our employee, that it actually translated into a performance score. So I could say that we embedded both of the OKR KPIs, the performance measurement of our employee, and then throughout the time of 2021, we are actually start working with a consultant to actually understand that how OKR as focus of the business performance, and also how we actually measure people performance, something that's quite different. We try to actually formalize again what are the right performance metrics. That it's still a a process also for us to actually capture the right performance framework and also metrics like that. But currently, right now, once we actually start using the right OKR process like that, we start to try to capture our performance of employee, looking with how they actually able to follow and also embedded the culture values in our in HappyFresh itself. And then that's where we actually start using profit as our performance management system, because it's actually as a one-part channel environment that we can actually capture OKR and also performance.
Okay, that's a very important point. I'll come to that in a moment. Adi, thanks for that. Now, with your pre-profit.co in-house development tool, right, as well as methodology, what were the problems that you were facing? Why did you want to change? And where did you find it difficult to scale with your previous PMS?
Okay, I think the issues and challenges that I face is that aside from the shifting of the framework that we use in terms of capturing the people performance, it's that the third-party vendors that we've been working on before is actually the speed delivery is not as what we expected on. And also in terms about the deliverables and also the stability of the system is actually not as what we actually expecting. There's maybe it's because it's actually built in-house. There's actually a lot of like problems, bugs that we need to actually escalate it, but it's not really being housed yet. The process is actually taking much more time and SLA to deliver that. So that's the reason why we actually start looking outside from the market. What are the performance system that is actually there?
Okay, great. And so how did you go about that process of selection, and how did you select profit.co?
Yes. So in terms about the selection, maybe it's a little bit merging about the selection of the OKR tools and the performance tool, because we want this to be in one environment. So at first, the requirement is actually to have the tools that can facilitate both of this. And then we try to search in the market using the Captura website to actually see what are the system or tools that is actually available out there. Aside from that, we also try to find the tools provider that is actually quite near with our working countries, so that it's easier. Also, if we actually want to communicate, it's easier. Also, if we're actually facing any problem to actually mitigate it, etc. like that. And we do have several of the requirement questionnaire in terms about the framework that we've been developing with our past consultant in terms of OKR and performance. And then from all of the discussion and also the sharing with the sales team from several of the performance system that we've been approaching on, then we try to measure it and rate it, which one is actually the one that can at least facilitate a little bit more from what our expectation. And that's when we try to look it up, profit is the one that people see that's quite able to facilitate most of our requirements.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thanks a lot for that explanation. So can you now explain your experience in terms of the transition from your homegrown tool to profit performance management system? How was the overall onboarding experience? How did you feel about it?
Okay. Personally, I do feel the onboarding was quite seamless. It's actually quite easy. One thing that I do understand that if it actually changes from one environment to another environment, there might be a lot, some learning that our employee needs to take on, right? In terms about the usability, in terms about how they used to actually work with a lot of like tools out there like that. But in terms about how the profit team is actually helping on onboarding it, if they actually have any issues and everything like that, is actually pretty satisfying for my end.
Okay, great, thanks. And in terms of the training as well as customer service, were you satisfied with the service provided by profit.co?
More or less, yes. I'm actually quite satisfied with all of the customer service, how the CSM is actually quite fast on responding it by WhatsApp or by the support chat that I have in the profit apps like that. They're also very helpful. Also, we actually get another training. We need to actually onboard a lot of new people like that. It's actually been pretty satisfying.
Okay, thank you very much. And in terms of performance management system, we at Profit.co believe, we are offering an agile PMS, right, where we are actually trying to enable continuous performance development, particularly when you couple PMS and OKRs together. And I'm very happy that HappyFresh chose us, just for that, having OKRs and agile PMS together. And we do try to provide a lot of, tools which can be of great value to customers, including 360-degree feedback, 9-box, matrix, etc. So in terms of your PMS implementation, are you using some of these features for implementing your PMS, Adi?
Yes, we actually start using the 360. I think one of the reasons why we go with Profit is that we actually want to try to implement 360-degree review aside just only for the manager and the self-review like that. And since Profit is actually able to facilitate that, that's also one of the reasons why we move forward with Profit. We start using that to actually capture, because as I mentioned before, we start moving forward with a new framework where we're actually measuring culture. So we actually want to have a wider audience to see how they're actually been perceiving in terms of what the performance deliverables like that. But aside from the 360, it's something that we still trying to explore, like the 9-box matrix and pulse survey, also something that we're not yet touched that, because we want it to be at a step for us to actually get used with the tools like that.
Okay, great, thanks. And currently, how many employees have been part of this assessment, Adi?
Out of 630, we have around 400 employees that is actually considered as permanent, that's joining the performance appraisal cycle right now.
Oh, great, thanks. And how many times a year do you do this performance assessment?
We do it semesterly, so we do it 2 times per year on June and December.
Okay, great, thanks. Now, let us look at the benefits, you feel that you are receiving out of this. And just before that, any feedback that you've had from different types of users, whether it is employees or managers, about how they felt using the tool and about the overall new process?
Okay. I think in terms about the overall framework, we're having 360 is actually quite good with the feedback like that. With the communication that I heard from the managers and also the employee itself like that. But I do hear several feedback in terms about the user experience and also user interface to make it a little bit more easy to understand in terms, let's say, that how we actually add the peers, in terms about how we actually understand how to see and also came into and see the process for each stage of the employee from the manager side like that. It's something that I hear verbally when I'm actually speaking with the managers and also the employee like that. But in the full spectrum, this is something that I also still work on to actually capture what are the feedback that we can actually get in terms about the process, in terms about the tools, how we actually can improve our performance management framework. But more or less, it's more about like the interface and also the experience on how to actually navigate it.
Okay, great. And in terms of high-level business benefits, right? I'm going to ask some specific questions, Adi, but overall, on the top of your mind, what are the top business benefits you think HappyFresh is receiving because of this new PMS approach with Profit.co? Yeah.
Okay. I think this is something that we really haven't touched on, but we still try to work on it. One of the benefits that I know is that aside from we were able to actually have a separate performance metrics measurement in Profit, we can actually embed an OKR, right? Which this is something that we haven't really touched on, but it's something that we can to try in the future. Let's say that if we actually quite mature enough as a company to actually see how the employees been impacting the deliverables of their team OKR. So I think this is something that's quite realistic and also healthy as a business. How we actually want to perceive and measure the employee performance, because it's not just solely about the subjectivity or how we feel they've been delivering, but also how they've been delivering the right impact to on our OKR progress like that. But this is something that we still try to work on it. aside from that, I think in terms of the business side, it's easier for us to actually export the data, share to the management so that we actually have the communication and also realigning also with the OKR progress, but it's still an offline part like that.
Okay, great, thanks. So what you're saying is that having OKRs and performance together will actually try to make this experience will look a lot more objective for everyone, right? That's what you were saying.
Correct.
Okay.
But I think this is still some observation from my point of view.
Yeah. Okay, great, thanks. Now, the other part, right, wherever possible, if you have seen any quantitative or qualitative benefits in terms of saving of time, right, for any of you, or that the process has become a little faster, maybe 10% faster, 25% faster, or if you have any such observations, right? I'm going to ask you a few questions on those lines, and anything that you've observed, if you can share, that would be great.
Okay, sure. I think in terms about the qualitative benefit from my end as an admin is that yes, since everything is actually being automated in the system, it's quite easy when we actually want to run out a performance cycle. We actually want to set up the deadline when they can actually once they can actually access like from the self, the manager or the peer like that. If they actually want to request some extension, this is something that's helping me also, and also the ability to export all the data so that we don't really need to actually calculate it manually in terms about the performance rating, how are comments, and also all of the details of the performance. But I do see that several improvements in terms of the email reminder. So we do share email every time we start the session, or every action is actually being taken off, right? So I think aside from that, will be very good as an admin if we actually have the ability to actually nudge any of the missing step for each of the personal people who's actually falling behind in terms of like the process, because it's something that I still do it quite manually to email people who's, let's say, in the self-review, we only have 2 days left, but there's not an option in the system to help us remind it automatically to send the email like that. But aside from that, it's actually been pretty helpful for us to record all of the data and also prepare all of for the calibration, and also for all of the record for the performance report later on.
Sure. And compared with, let's say, your previous experience with the tool, the amount of lead time that it took to run the whole process, do you see any reduction in terms of the amount of time that it took because of the automation?
Definitely. A lot of time is actually reduced, because back then in the in-house tools that we have, it's basically just a tool for us to report it, but we don't have any option to actually send an email. We don't have an option to actually have an individual people to actually see the process, and also if we need some extension, something like that, something that it's something that we don't have in the past tools. So that's why it's very helpful.
Okay. Just one last question on that. Lead time is start to finish, right? Previously, how much time you took, and now how much time are you taking, Adi?
This is for the overall performance, or how is it?
Just the performance appraisal alone.
I think in terms of the performance appraisal alone, back then we opened it for the whole month, right? And I think even for now, we actually still open it as a whole month, let's say, starting from the mid-June until mid-July like that. But the preparation, usually it takes much more longer because the manual process that we have. But right now, it's actually, I think when we want to start preparing the performance cycle, it only takes me several minutes until hours to actually run it right now. So it's actually very fast.
Oh, okay. And previously it used to be much higher than that in terms of.
Previously, it needs to ensure that everything was okay, all the data is actually recorded, nothing is actually missing before we actually run the performance cycle.
Okay, great. So it's now just a minutes to an hour, probably. That's what you're saying. Okay, that's great. So overall, apart from this efficiency and the manual work, which is really reducing, you said, has there also been ability to reduce the number of follow-up and better reporting because of the automatic emails and the tools which are provided for reports? Do you see any benefits there?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. And also maybe another question on this is, do you see any improvement in terms of where previously, let's say you had to do some reassessments, or because people were, the satisfaction level of employees on the appraisal itself, right? Do you see any changes to that compared from previous to now?
In terms of the assessment that happening within the manager and the employee, I think because we actually implemented a new process also, not also a new tools. So this is something that's still happening. But one thing that is actually pretty helpful is that as an admin, we don't necessarily need to actually help everyone to reopen it. Right? Let's say the employee needs to actually reassess something, the manager can actually easily open it as long as they actually have the communication. But yeah, this is something that's still happening. Mostly because we have a new framework to be implemented this semester.
Okay, great, thanks. And probably one of the last couple of questions. One, you mentioned that you have not yet run a pulse survey after this, right? You're planning to, but you have not yet done. Am I right?
Yes, planning to. I'm preparing right now, and because we actually still waiting with the finalization from the management in terms about the calibration. So once everything is done, it's something that we will run it mostly in the mid until the end of this month.
Okay. So, so how do you rate your overall experience with Profit.co, the product, the people, the overall experience?
I think out of 10, I will rate it 8. It's actually pretty satisfying. There's still some room of improvement in terms of the system usability and also user interface like that. But overall, it's actually pretty satisfying. The customer service is actually pretty helpful also, and it's actually able to help us to be more, more automated in our process.
Okay, great, thanks. And any advice you have for us in terms of what we could do to improve?
I think this is something that definitely I do have, but something that I still collecting also from our employee, what kind of improvement that we can do. But surely once I done with the post survey and also I capture all the improvement that we can do, I will share to your team also so that we can actually, so that I can actually share what are some of the improvement that can actually help us, specifically HappyFresh, to run a more smoother and seamless performance system.
Sure. Great. Thank you very much, Adi.